Hi, everyone. This is Katya from Katya.coach. Someone asked me the other day, as a life coach, what do you think about dreams and dreaming? And I thought that was such an important question. Dreams are classically thought to be vehicles for guidance, vehicles for messages from our soul, right? Because we have the soul that is on this journey and that's always there, and then we have the personality and the habitual patterns, and a lot of the time we're stuck in that layer, but the soul is still kind of in the background, wanting to be on the path and gleaning the gifts um, and the lessons that is here to learn. So there are actually indigenous cultures in this world that are centered around dreaming, and use that as their shamanic tool. And by shamanic, I just mean um, a way of getting deep into the emotional self, deep into the spiritual self, and relating with all of the archetypes inside of us, all the different parts that are at play all the time that we don't necessarily see, because they are, if you know the iceberg metaphor, they're not above, the water unless they're not visible. That's all the material that is underneath the water, and it goes very, very deep sometimes. So dreams give us access to this, and because of that, they are our guru. They are our real teacher. At the end of the day, while we're healing, while we're on our healing journey, we might need to go to psychics, we might need to go to astrologers, we might need to go to teachers, we might need to go to guides. And at the end of the day, what hopefully we're learning, and sometimes this takes a while, that's okay, but hopefully at the end of the day, what we're learning is to be our own guide, which doesn't mean I do whatever I want. It means I listen to the inner voice within myself, that quiet, calm voice that always knows what's right. And it's not afraid, so it's not going to scream at me. It's not going to be loud. It's always going to be quiet. It's always going to be calm because it has wisdom. But it is the inner voice. And oftentimes during the day, it's hard to hear the inner voice, right? Because we are in the day world, where in the sunlight, we are, where not always, I was going to say, maybe you're somewhere where it's rather dark, especially in the winter, but still there's a quality of, everyone's up. It's very easy to get distracted, essentially. And our inner self, our soul might still be giving us the messages, but it's so faint. It's so far in the background that it's easy to say, that doesn't matter. I'll just do what I always do, and I'll eat that burger that I always eat for lunch, even though there's some little voice saying in the background, maybe have a seasonal, bowl of veggies, or and something homemade, or whatever that inner voice is telling us. Maybe your inner voice is telling you something, completely different that's not related. But that was just an example. So the thing about dreaming that that I find so useful, once you make that connection to your dreams, you can actually start to ask your dreams for answers. And so if you have a big question going on in your life, you can actually hold it as a question, right? Sometimes we're very anxious to get the answer. You can hold it as a question, calmly, and then ask or invite your dreams to give you the answer. And sometimes it'll be symbolic. If it's symbolic, you can run to the internet and do a Google search. What does it mean to dream of a white bear? Which can be helpful And again, that's kind of like what I was saying at the beginning of the video about, you know, going to psychics, going to astrologers, etc., going to guides, and then eventually becoming your own guru. It's the same thing with dreams, is that you can use the internet, you can use these sort of stock symbolism. Eventually, what becomes important is, what does that mean to you? What does a white bear mean in your inner symbology, in your life? Did it mean something to you when you were a child? Did you see something, you know, in a picture book, and that created a meaning? And once you start to have that inner dialogue with yourself, your dream decoding becomes that much more powerful. Oftentimes it's very straightforward for me, because I'm actually very auditory and I'm a writer. So for me, my dreams will often just tell me in words, you know, or I'll recall something that I heard that stuck with me, but I didn't realize quite what an important message it was and how synchronistic it was, and what a communication from the universe it was, until I'm in those quiet moments by myself dreaming, and in the middle of the night it comes and I remember that saying, or I remember that quote, and it like bubbles up to the surface. And like I said, oftentimes it'll actually be a voice speaking and saying, you need to do this now. And so what I found is, you know, a key ingredient is working with the dreams. So once I actually started to listen to that guidance and heed the guidance, it started to increase a lot more, until now, you know, ultimately, and I'm sure this will continue and change, right? But right now, I dream pretty much every night. I have something that I remember, and something that I can take with me into my day. Sometimes it's more subtle. Sometimes it's a big wake up call. And, you know, especially if I'm a little bit more off path, then I get a bigger wake up call. So how do we hear our dreams more, right? Well, like I said, number one is sort of taking them seriously, and just having that attitude of, I want to listen, I want to hear you, um, I take you seriously. And then, you know, that creates a relationship of reverence, so that the dreams feel welcomed, and that guidance feels welcomed. And when it does, it becomes more robust, and you have a more positive relationship with it. The second thing is keeping your body clear, relatively at least, of substances and drugs and alcohol and things like that. Now, cannabis, I wanted to touch on, because it infamously can create periods where we don't dream. People that smoke cannabis daily will often say, I don't dream. And so I don't actually have a yes or a no, a positive or negative opinion about cannabis outright. I believe that it is, you know, a teacher plant, and it can teach us many things. And I've seen people have enormous benefit from cannabis use for a period of time. But if you're doing that, I would really highly suggest taking breaks for your body, both to clean out your body, especially if you're smoking, inhaling, but also to invite those dreams back in, so that at least sometimes you're connecting to that guidance. And so that's what I would say about that. And, you know, drugs and alcohol, obviously they can really they can really wreak havoc on the body. And the body and the mind and the soul and the emotions are, of course, all different sheaths of our being. And so they're all interconnected. You might find that, and I've seen this in folks, that when they're using drugs and alcohol, they'll have nightmares and things like that. And to my mind, that's, you know, your soul really screaming like, hey, I'm trying to get a message across to you, but you are not really clear-headed enough. You're not being a clear channel right now. Now, again, I don't want to judge any behaviors at all. You know, we're human, we come here, and there's so much available to try, and we might want to try it all. But ultimately at the end of the day, I do think that the messages from the inner self can get a little bit stuck in the webs when we don't keep a clear channel. Exercise also really, really helps us to be a clear channel for our dreams. And the other thing is sugar. So sugar has been shown to block clairvoyance in at least in some people, right? I wouldn't make a blanket statement about that, until I had more information and studies and things like that, which I don't. I've just read this and corroborate it with my own experience. I really find that when I'm eating sugar, I am not in touch with my guidance in the same way. And that actually goes for natural sweeteners for me as well. But that might have to do with just my body type. I don't have conclusive about that. But what I would say is test yourself, right? Test yourself with different foods. For some people, dairy is very clogging. Their body doesn't digest it well, and they get mucus, and it's almost like this layer between them and their innermost self. And, for some people, sugar can do that. So I would just say experiment with different foods and really be attentive and become sensitive. How do they affect my body? How do they affect my ability to hear that inner voice? Now, the inner voice isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it tells us things we don't want to hear, but at the end of the day, we're much better off for hearing them. And they give us the ability to be truly responsible. That voice, listening to the inner voice, can make us truly responsible, as opposed to the responsibility that comes from, I'm just following the rules that my parents taught me, that my society taught me, and, not realizing that those have flaws, that those are based on belief systems, and belief systems are always limited. And the point of our lives is to be on the journey and to actually be expanding what is out there and what is known through our lives, through being here. So that's a little bit about how to hear your dreams better. And then the last piece that I wanted to say is, if you're really going to use dreams in this way, if you're going to become more intimate with dreams and use them to get answers, I would suggest highly to keep a notebook and a pen or some kind of writing utensil within arm's reach of your bed. And in the middle of the night, if you have a dream, because oftentimes when we wake from the dream, it's in the middle of the night, sometimes it's in the morning, but you want to be able to write it down right away so that it doesn't slip away from you. Don't think about it or try to decode it yet. Stay in that feeling of the dream itself, the quality of the dream itself. Write down as many details as you can remember. And then, you can process it, you can make meaning out of it toward the, morning, or sometimes it's just very obvious. Sometimes it's very obvious meaning. But the other thing, the last thing is that when I wake up in the middle of the night, the last thing that I want to do is use a light. So the second to last thing I want to do is turn on a light that's going to wake up my brain and my pineal gland. But the really very last thing I want to do is use, the light on my phone or an electronic device, because that sends out a kind of light that is very, it really wakes up the brain. And even if you get back to sleep, it can make it harder to get back to sleep. And even if you do go back to sleep, it can Keep the brain awake, even though you feel like you're sleeping. The brain can stay active, so you're not really getting the rest in your brain that you need. And so what I can recommend is keeping a candle and some matches or a lighter by your bed, so that if you need to write down your dream, you need a little light, you can light that candle. And that I found is the closest thing to moonlight, which is, of course, the most natural light to be exposed to at night. And if you do have a bright full moon or close to it streaming in through your window, then of course, that's a wonderful way to write down your dreams. Just open the curtain without even having to turn on anything. But the next best thing I would say is candlelight. So that is all, my friends. I highly encourage you. I think it's really fun to start using your dreams as a way of guiding you, and a way of staying in touch with your inner being. And I'm curious to hear how it unfolds. Happy dreaming.